difficulties. Major. We can see if we can get YouTube started again. I apologize. I do. Well, I mean, nobody's listening, so it doesn't really matter. Okay? It's just me, myself, and I here getting frustrated that things aren't working. All right, there goes YouTube. I'm going to go back to YouTube. Oh, man. All right, hopefully
getting frustrated that things aren't working.
All right, I think I got that done. All right. Now we'll give it a second here. Go back here to webcast. All right. We're going to make this work, okay? One way or the other, we're going to get this to work. I do apologize. Yeah, I don't know. Everything. When I went live the first time, right when I hit the button for the intro, I started coughing my full head off, right? So then by the time I came back in after the intro, I was in no place ready to even try to talk. So I get that fixed. We stop, we delete that, we start again. And then right when I'm trying to give my intro, there's some weird sound going on behind me outside. I don't know what was happening. I didn't know how bad it was going to get and how much it was going to interrupt everything. So I'm trying to talk, but I'm not even paying attention to what I'm saying. And so then by the time that sound kind of went away, then I was like, oh, wait, what did I just say for my intro? Like, I didn't even remember what I had just said, something about church bells. And then I was like, wait a minute, now where am I at here? How do I move forward? Wait, do I need to go back? What if I said that? And then it was like, it was over, it was done. So I'm going to go look out the window really quick. Yeah, whatever it was appears to be gone. I don't know, it was crazy. Yeah. I don't know, but it's over. I think that's all good. So I think we can try this again. Yeah, we will try this again, ladies and gentlemen. That's all we can do. When at first you don't succeed, you try again. And when you don't succeed the second time, you try a third time. And if you don't succeed the third time, I guess you just give up. All right, delete your podcast and move on. All right, but I'm not going to do that. Here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Now we're going to try this. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, let's hope there's no more delays. Let's hope there's no more interruptions. And let's hope for no technological disasters. Wait. Okay, all right. Okay, I thought the sound was coming back outside, and I'm like, what is happening? All right, I think it's all good. Ladies and gentlemen, now without any further delay, we go live officially. Just pretend those other times did not happen. We go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good morning, everyone. It is Friday, December the 26th, 2025. It is currently 11:37 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, there was a time a long time ago in a galaxy far, far, far away. At least it feels that way. But there was a time when church bells didn't just mark Sunday morning. They marked life. They told you where you belonged. You need to be in church. The church bells are sounding. It's time to be in church. They told you when the week slowed down. They told you that God, faith, and the church were simply there, whether you question them or not. Those church bells signified the church is here. There's God, there's faith, there's church. It's right there. Now that world is gone. And when I say that world is gone, obviously there's some churches that still sound the church bells, but what that world signified, what all of that was, is gone. It's no more. And when I say it's gone, it's not fading. It's not wobbling. It is gone. The world has changed dramatically. And it is changing rapidly, even from what it was to what it is. What it is changing rapidly to what it will be. today, December the 26th, 2025, we live in a time where tens of thousands of churches are closing their doors. Entire generations are growing up with no memory of church, no Bible stories, no inherited faith, no sense that Christianity is even necessary to understanding life, morality, or meaning. They don't see it. They don't even think Christianity is really relevant to understanding life, morality, or meaning. And this is not happening because Americans are suddenly becoming smarter or because people have carefully examined Christianity and refuted it. No. This is happening for different reasons. In fact, it's happening in a quiet way. It's happening gradually. It's almost polite in the way it's happening. People are not storming out of the church in protest. They're just never walking in. An article that I saw earlier this morning is calling what is happening the Great Unchurching. But maybe that phrase is actually too gentle to describe what's happening. They call it the Great Unchurching. Maybe we need a different name, but something is happening. Now, typically when I turn on this microphone to say something is happening, most of the time, I don't think most people really care or take it very seriously. I mean, why should they, right? I'm just some, insignificant theology podcast. Why should anyone care? And typically my feelings and my perspective about what is going on in the church is pretty much rejected by everyone, right? I'm in the minority of the minority of the minority. I tend to be very critical of what the church has been doing, and I've been that way for about 30 years. And, my criticisms of what the church is doing, got me kicked off Christian radio. So I understand that my voice is not going to have any impact, but I think we have to talk about what's going on. Other people are mentioning it as well. Again, the article that I saw today was called The Great Unchurching. That's pretty significant. Because what's really happening, I think, isn't just the loss of church attendance. So I think a lot of times these discussions turn into that. Well, church attendance is down, church attendance is up, and so there will be all these never-ending debates, everyone bringing out their statistics. But I think we can have those statistical arguments, and I'm not saying there's not a place for them, but I think the Great Unchurching, something is happening. No matter how many arguments you want to have over statistics, something is happening. No matter how many arguments you want to have over church attendance, something is happening, whether we want to admit it or not. I think what is occurring is the collapse, the complete and total collapse of Christianity as a cultural framework. The assumptions are gone. The authority is completely gone. And we'll talk more about that because, that's a big, there's a lot to talk about there. The shared language is gone. And I think here's the uncomfortable truth that the data is forcing us to face. Even if you want to argue against the data, I think there's an uncomfortable truth we have to face if we're going to be honest. Most people leaving Christianity are not rejecting God. They are rejecting a version of Christianity that no longer makes sense. It no longer feels honest. And it no longer feels trustworthy. I think what we can say is what is happening is that people may be leaving Christianity, in many cases leaving the church, not because they're rejecting God, but because they're rejecting this version of Christianity that the church has put forth. And it no longer makes sense. It no longer feels honest. And it no longer feels trustworthy. So this may raise a question that I think the church has tried to avoid for a very long time. Is this a failure of belief, or is this a failure of what the church has been preaching, what the church has been defending, and what the church has been selling as Christianity? I don't think it's a failure of belief. Now, that's what Christians always say. If people leave us because they were never believers in the first place. I understand that we'll quote 1 John, and there was that again, they take that out of its historical context about what was going on there. But that's okay. That's just always the answer. And it's very easy to do that. Even as a pastor, it's easy to do that, right? If people leave, well, they left because, well, You'll find some reason to justify their leaving. But Christianity at large, the church at large, I think has to stop and start asking some questions. Is this really a failure of belief, or is this a failure of what the church has been preaching, what the church has been defending, and what the church has been selling? So what I'm going to try to do in this episode, this is not one about panic. I don't want to make this use hyperbole or exaggeration. I want to try to be fair and accurate. I'm not here to try to rally the troops. That's definitely not my approach. And I'm definitely not going to offer up some cheap solutions. I don't even know if I have any solutions. I don't know if I have any. Maybe you'll hear some being suggested, but I don't know if I have any, to be honest. But I'm going to try to look directly into the data, right? I'm going to try to look directly into the data here. I'm going to do my very best. I'm going to try to look at reality. I'm going to try to look at the implications of that reality. And I'm going to try to ask what this moment exposes about the church, about faith, about whether the gospel we supposedly claim to defend has been buried under layers of power, politics, moralism, and false promises. Because if Christianity collapses, when it no longer holds cultural power, then maybe what's collapsing maybe isn't the gospel at all. Maybe it's everything we've built around it, and maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a bad thing. I don't know. I think a lot of what the church has become, if it collapses, I don't think it really matters. To be fair, I don't think who cares? Because I think so much of it is not anything to do with the gospel or what the church was supposed to be in the first place. So before we start taking this apart, before we start analyzing it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer hopefully a pretty deep analysis. I am also going to turn my attention and make predictions for 2026. Because we're fast approaching now the end of 2025. It's time to start focusing on 2026. And some of these predictions you may hear and other, more focused episodes, because I'm going to try to do a lot in this. We're going to look at this idea of the Great Unchurching. We're going to look at the data. We're going to listen to the information, and then we're going to turn towards 2026. So we'll be doing a lot of this kind of thing probably over the next few days. But let's bring up the article itself, all right? Because I think if we don't have the article, then we don't have the data. So here we go. This was published 7 hours ago. 7 hours ago. So you talk about hot off the press. This is from Axios.com. Axios.com. Okay, I have to do this, even though it's on the iPad, okay? Because this sounds more dramatic, all right? But it's hot off the presses. It's not that hot. It's 7 hours ago. But I doubt I doubt there's any Christian podcast or anybody on Sermon Audio talking about it right now, okay? I think there's very few who've gone live after this article has been released, all right? But it was released 7 hours ago, and it's called The Great Unchurching of America. The Great Unchurching of America. And then it has this kind of like image, this illustration. You see like a little bit of blue carpet, and then you see all these, it looks like red, kind of supposed to be kind of resemble the American flag a little bit, but it's a blue carpet with all these pews that are red in color, right? And it's the Great Unchurching of America because all the pews are empty, right? The Great Unchurching. This is how the article begins. The United States of America is undergoing the fastest religious shift in modern history, marked by a rapid increase in the religiously unaffiliated and numerous church closures nationwide. Now, let's stop right here. There was a book, was it a year ago? maybe 2 years ago. It may have even been 3 years ago. I don't know. I did I think a number of broadcasts about it. And it was a book about the Great Unchurching, basically, right? That these authors had done great research, and they're saying we're in the midst of the greatest modern religious shift in history. They basically said the same thing. I can't remember the name of the book, but we talked about it on the podcast. So this is not a new claim. Well, let me make it very clear. Even though this article was published 7 hours ago, this is an old claim, and it's still being mentioned and still being discussed and still being talked about. Now, almost every single time I talk about the Great Unchurching and we have this great religious shift happening, the biggest one in modern history, and now we have more people becoming religiously unaffiliated. We have all these churches closing. I almost immediately get pushback. And someone will email me, I don't think these numbers, I don't agree with these statistics. And they will tell me that it's just not right. It's not correct. That basically, I don't know, we're in revival of some sort. Who knows? And that's okay. I don't know if that's Christians just trying to, I don't know. I don't know what it is, but that's okay. You can deny. And look, I'm more than willing to acknowledge that there has been great debate about the statistics and what the statistics actually say. I'm going to argue that I don't care what the statistics say. Something is happening in American church and within Christianity, and you can argue all day about the statistics. I'm just going to sit back and go, while you guys argue the statistics, I'm sorry. If you don't see what's happening, I'm sorry, you're blind. That's my feelings. All right? Now, the article goes on to say, why does this matter? Well, the Great Unchurching of America comes as identity and reality are increasingly shaped by non-institutional spiritual sources. Now that's wordy, but let me read it again. The Great Unchurching of America. So we have people leaving the church, and it's happening as the time where people's identity, right, their reality is being shaped by non-institutional spiritual sources. And I've been saying this for a long time. Whether people go to church or whether people don't go to church, a lot of how they think, how they perceive reality, how they feel about themselves, and what they think spiritually is not being shaped by the church they attend. It's being shaped by things outside of the church. And I talked about this in other contexts, right? That I asked people listening to this podcast, okay, what has been the biggest influence in your life spiritually? What has helped you grow the most? What has had the biggest impact on you spiritually? Your church or something outside the church? I think 99% of the people said outside of the church. And they mentioned things like sermons online, podcasts, books, other things other than that institution. And that's constantly made me question then the institution itself. Because if we're paying all of this money to keep a building open on a street corner, hire a staff, do all of these programs, spend all of this money, all of this activity, all this sound and fury signifying nothing, if the church is there doing all of these things, but yet the people walking in are actually being influenced by something outside of the church, whether it's a podcast, a YouTube channel, a book, then what's the point of the institution? Other than to just go through the motions. If everyone is really growing and being challenged, and that's people who stay affiliated with the church. But the reality is, whether you like it or not, people's worldview, people's identity, what they feel, what they think, what they believe is shaped by non-institutional sources. YouTube, TikTok, AI, podcast, from YouTube mystics to TikTok tarot cards to digital skeptics to AI generated prayer bots, you just name it. It's a tectonic transformation that has profound implications for, I don't know, everything, for basically every area of life. So that's why it matters, because we have this major shift that is occurring. And again, people are being shaped by things outside of the church. The institution, then, let's just say it this way. We can say it this way. The institution. Now, I'm not talking biblically or theologically. Biblically or theologically, the church will continue to, Christians will continue to say, the church was established by God. We will say all the right biblical and theological words about the church, right? I'm not denying that. We may say it. We may even attend it. I'm saying it's an irrelevant institution. And the people who even go there are being influenced by everything outside of that institution. The institution is only there for show. It's only there because it's supposed to be. It's only there because, we say, the Bible says, it talks about church. We have to go to church. But as an actual influential institution, it's gone. It's dead. That world is gone. Just take down the church bells. It's finished. Let's look at the numbers. Nearly 3 in 10 American adults today identify as religiously unaffiliated. That's a 33% jump since 2013. 3 in 10. No, they are not religiously affiliated. All right, that comes from Public Religion Research Institute, PRRI. Now that's quicker. That jump, that 33% jump, that's quicker than almost any major religious shift in modern U.S. history, and it's happening across every single racial group. About 4 in 10 Americans ages 18 to 29 identify as religiously unaffiliated. That's a 38% jump. So 18 to 29, a 38% jump. You take all adults, a 33% jump. That means that there's about 4 in 10 Americans. Okay, that's the 18 to 29. So whether you take all adults are just 18 to 29. The point is you're either at a 38% increase or a 33% increase. And these are people who are no longer religiously affiliated. I have no religious affiliation. No religious affiliation. Now that's numbers. Let me give you another number. All right. An unprecedented 15,000 churches are expected to shut their doors this year. That's far more than the few thousand expected to open, according to denominational reports and church consultants. 15,000 churches. 15,000. That's unprecedented. 57% of Americans seldom or never attend religious services. That's a jump from 40% in 2000. 57%. Just try to wrap your mind around all of these numbers. We have about 38% of Americans who no longer have a religious affiliation. Okay, they're unaffiliated. All right, that's somewhere between 33 and 38. Again, depending on which age group you're looking at, we'll say 35% of Americans no longer have a religious affiliation. All right, 15,000 churches are going to close, and about 57% of Americans seldom or never attend religious services, which is a 40% jump. Before the pandemic, a church should expect to lose about 15% of its members year over year. So in a typical year, you're going to lose about 15% of your members. That's a rate of 1.2 million leaving churches annually, nationally. That number has accelerated since then. So you already have people leaving churches at large numbers. Now, when they leave a church, now let's just be fair. Sometimes what happens, they leave church A, just go to church B. Typically what you see in church growth is simply people leaving one church to go to another. That's usually how churches grow. They grow by taking other people's members. So that's great. Church B grows while church A dies. And church B doesn't care that church A dies, let me tell you, okay? They don't care, even if they're similar in their doctrine and theology. Now, this makes politicians nervous. Politicians don't like this. This is like, oh no, it's going to cost us more money. I found this interesting, all right? So they were talking to some political consultants about all of this, and they're like, well, this is making it harder for us to reach, well, voters. Listen to these quotes. We have to find religiously unaffiliated voters. We have to engage them and answer their skeptical questions rather than just go to a church and pass out campaign literature. It costs campaigns about $1.40 to reach out to a single religiously unaffiliated voter, but it only costs us about 45 cents to reach a faith-based voter. Why? Because you can just go to church and hand out their political information. Now, and that would never happen in a million. If anyone of any political party came to my church and wanted to hand out literature, I'd tell them to hit the road and don't come back unless they want to attend church and learn. I'm not here for your stinking religious party to use my church voters to try to get votes. No, this is a church. It's not a political institution. It's not a political party, and it's not a headquarters for Trump or the Republican Party or any other political party. So for politicians, they're like, oh no, we got to fix this because, we got to find a cheap way to reach people. And the cheap way is the church. The church should never even be a way that politicians could reach anybody. The church is supposed to be reaching people. The church is not supposed to be the place where you can reach people with political campaign messages. It's supposed to be where you're reaching people with theology and the Bible and church history. But those numbers are crazy. This shift in religious activity is leaving behind a trail of church graveyards, empty buildings that are now difficult to sell or have been abandoned. Now these churches that once served as community gathering places for Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, voting, precincts, or town halls are leaving a void. Well, because now you got to go find a new place to meet because the church is closed down. Now, what's interesting is megachurches, though, digging into the numbers, megachurches seem to show some sign of stability. It's not going to reverse the overall decline, but for some weird reason, megachurches just seem to find a way to keep going. They seem stable. So the churches that are being impacted are the smaller churches. The megachurches seem to continue to grow. I don't know what they do. They've got the magic sauce. They got the magic formula. Now, as Americans unchurch, this is very important to realize, YouTube channels are attracting hundreds of thousands of subscribers. AI and chatbot technology is being used by millions for spiritual guidance, confession, and prayer. Some of these AI Bible apps have reached more than 30 million downloads. Now, there's more here. I could look at all the other numbers, but something, I think we could say it this way. The old religious map, it's disappearing. It's going away. We have a new religious map that's being developed, right? It's a digital one. It's more secular. It's more decentralized. It's deeply fragmented. And it's only beginning to take shape. And we're going to have to figure out where it's going. Now, just considering those numbers, those numbers are staggering. Now, again, you may push back on the numbers, but whether you push back on it or not, I'm telling you, a new religious map is forming. Whether you want to accept it or not, it's happening. And you track down some of the big religious podcasts. Look at how many downloads they're getting. YouTube, some of these have so many people attend, far more than the average church. Churches are closing while religious podcasts and religious YouTube channels are growing. So people are becoming religiously unaffiliated, but that doesn't mean they're abandoning God or scripture or belief. They're abandoning the church. So Are you ready? Let's try to break all of this down. That's just working through the information. That's just going through the information, trying to give you the numbers the best I can and just trying to talk about them. Those are the numbers. So let's try to break all of this down, all right? And I'm going to just try to offer some analysis and then make some predictions, okay? I think what we see with the Great Unchurching is that it's structural. It's not cyclical. It's structural. It's not cyclical. I don't think this is a temporary dip. I don't think this is I don't think it's compared. Sometimes people want to compare this to past declines. And typically what will happen is you would get a dip, you would get a decline, and then you would get what we will refer to as revival. Now, when we say revival, I always question that because we typically view revival by numbers. And so, but we'll say this, in the past, maybe you get a dip and then you get an increase for whatever reason. I think the rise of the religiously unaffiliated, or as they used to be called in previous literature, nones, N-O-N-E-S, the nones, this is generational. This is cumulative. This is accelerating. The younger are not just unchurched, they're the never churched, meaning they have no shared biblical literacy. They have no institutional loyalty at all. And there's no cultural pressure on them to return later in life. A lot of times what you would see is, okay, all right, you have say a young person, they grow up in church, right? They have to go through all the typical church stuff and the youth group and all of that stuff. And somewhere, 16, 17, 18, they're out. Peace out, gone. They're gone. But yet they were so raised in the church that almost inevitably what happens is they run off 18, they go do whatever. They're doing whatever, living however they want to live, engaging in whatever they want to live. Then they ultimately get married, and then they have a child, and then inevitably what do? They go back to church. Why did they go back to church? Just because they were raised that way. That's just seems like, okay, well, now that we have a kid, we want them to be raised with they'll get that same moral framework. And in many cases, what they do, they come back. And what drives me crazy is they come back, but they come back for moralism. They come back so that their kids will learn to be good little boys and girls. I don't think they come back for theological reasons or biblical reasons. They come back for moralism. So many people sitting in the pew are just there for some sense of moralism and some sense of spiritual duty or some sense of spiritual accomplishment. But that's how it typically worked. But this new generation, they don't feel that pressure to come back. They don't, because they were not only are they the unchurched, they're the never churched. So this has great implications for the church. Churches can't assume now, well, they're going to come back when they have kids. So, hey, we maybe lose them now, but they'll be back. And then as soon as they come walking through that door with their kids, make sure you make a beeline right to them, because that's that young couple with kids. And that can be generationally beneficial for the church, because not only do you have the parents, you have their kids. And when they grow up, they can be... Yeah, so the church is all there for them, and they're going to make sure that young couple's like, oh, we've got this for little Johnny, and we got this for little Susie, and we got this plan and this activity, and you got to market it and you got to sell it. So churches can't assume that people are going to come back. I don't think churches can assume that cultural Christianity is going to function as a bridge. Now, this cultural Christianity thing, well, we could get into discussion there, but I think a lot of times the church relies on some form of cultural Christianity to be a doorway back to the church, because people are raised with kind of a cultural Christianity, or because Christianity plays such a role in culture that bridge will bring them back to the church. It may bring them back to some spiritual and curiosity or desire. I don't think they're going to necessarily go to the church to have that spiritual desire fulfilled. The church is now operating in a post-Christian culture, which we've talked before. I think we have to realize it's a post-Christian culture. It is not a backslidden Christian culture. So the church, the unchurching is structural. I don't think it's cyclical. I don't think we can look at it that it's going to have this dip. I think things are fundamentally have changed. I think institutional Another thing to consider from all of these numbers and all the things we've talked about, I think institutional authority has completely collapsed, and I think it has permanently. Now, whenever we talk about institutional authority collapsing, let me make it very clear, all right? And I know I tick off Christians when I say that. The thing that killed institutional authority was the Reformation. Now, it may have taken a long time to kill it, but it did. And I've said it before. What Luther was trying to do was stand against maybe the institutional authority of the Roman Catholic Church, whether intentional or unintentional, whether he just wanted to debate or have a conversation. He ultimately said, and I'm not saying this was said explicitly, but clearly this was implied, the church is wrong. And I'm going to say the church is wrong, and I'm going to stand against it. And once you could stand against it and say the church is wrong, and you could challenge that authority based on your interpretation of Scripture, based on your theological beliefs, well, the inevitable result is a nuclear explosion. Well, the church no longer is the authority. The church is no longer in control. Who is? Now, Luther would have tried to say Scripture is the authority. And we love to say that, but we know what that ultimately led to. It's not that the Scripture is the authority. It's not the church is no longer the authority. The individual is the authority. So the individual opens the Bible, whether they've gone to Bible college, whether they've gone to seminary, irrelevant. They don't need it. They just open the Bible, read the Bible, come to a conclusion, and then they become the authority, and they judge the church, and they tell the pastor whether they're right or wrong. They'll tell an entire denomination that they're wrong, and then they will either go start their own church, not go to church, or go find a church that will agree with them. The institution's authority has been dead for a long time. We may keep propping up the church as having some kind of authority and submit to your leaders and all of that garbage. In reality, the leaders have always been the individual. They determine what is truth, and they determine whether they're going to agree or disagree, and they will walk away thinking they are right. The church has no authority. It's been dead since the Reformation, and I think we're just finally realizing it. And I think a lot of people in the culture realize the church it doesn't have any authority. People are not saying Christianity is false. I think they're saying that the institution, that the church, they're not relevant. They're not necessary. They're not even trustworthy. And why would you think the church is trustworthy when everyone sitting in the pew is saying, well, the pastor is wrong, and the church is wrong, and the church is wrong, and this church is wrong, and this church is wrong, and this church is wrong, and the pastor's an idiot, and the pastor doesn't know. If everyone can sit there and do that, then why would anyone from outside think the institution is trustworthy? The institution is just a failed mess. Other than when you finally find the church that you think is right, you think that church is right, while you declare all the other churches wrong. So Christian institutions, or the church, is no longer seen as trustworthy, relevant, or necessary. And this applies across churches, denominations, clergy, and religious political alliances. So what's the implication for Christians? Well, the appeal to authority. The church says, nobody cares. The Bible clearly says, no, the Bible clearly says to you, but you're not my authority. The church is not the authority. I'm the authority. And I say the Bible clearly says opposite than what you think it says. So many will say, well, the church is simply trying to mediate Scripture through their own, this institution. Well, that is not relevant or necessary. And I think this deconstruction language resonates with people who still believe in God. They still believe in God, but they're deconstructing because I think they begin to question a lot of this. So the Great Unchurching is structural. It's not cynical. And I think, secondly, institutional authority has completely collapsed. It is gone. And you can blame the Reformation for that. It's the unintended consequence. And whenever I do this, people will say, oh, no, I still respect my pastor. What? Until you don't. All the pastor has to do is say one thing you disagree with, and then boom, he's finished and he's done, and you kick him to the curb. He's only there to serve your purpose, which is to say what you want him to say. And the minute he says something you don't like, he is replaceable. He is gone. You don't care what even happens to him. You're going to move on to what makes you happy. The church is useless. because the people in the pew are God. Church closures, you could say, is it a theological crisis? We know it's a financial crisis. There's no question about that. The article and other statistics note about 15,000 churches are closing annually. Now, that's not just poor leadership. That's not just weak marketing. I don't think that's simply a failure to modernize. I think it reflects something deeper. It's a collapse, a total and complete collapse of the assumed necessity of congregational life. And churches try to drive that home. You need to be here. You won't grow as a Christian without the church. You can't stand without the church. You need the church. You need the small group. And because the church just doubles down on trying to explain it's necessary. But I think the people are like, it's not necessary, man. See, the New Testament vision, maybe of a gathered community, is now culturally unintelligible. It doesn't even make any sense to the culture anymore. See, for many, community, well, that can be digital. I don't need to go to a place. Meaning, if I need meaning, purpose, well, that's my own individual thing. I don't need the church to try to give me meaning. And authority is self-curated. The church doesn't have any authority. I have the authority. And I'm telling you, that's like the heart of Protestantism. I'm going to curate my own authority. How do I do that? I open a Bible. Let me read. It means this, the end. My interpretation now is authoritative. And if my pastor disagrees with my interpretation, the pastor is wrong, the church is wrong, the denomination is wrong, because I'm right. And why am I right? Because I know I'm right. Now, in many cases, the reason they think what they think is not even because of their own study, it's because they're being influenced by things outside of the church, which once again shows that the church is irrelevant because the people are being influenced by that which is outside of the church. The church is, I think we can say it this way. The church no longer occupies a default space in anyone's life. It doesn't. So let's try to go through these again. The Great Unchurching is structural. It's not cyclical. It's structural. The institutional authority is gone. It's collapsed. It's gone. Just go boom. It's gone. And the church closure, I mean, the church closure is a crisis. I don't even know. I don't even know what we do. The church closures just demonstrate. I don't know. I don't even know how to interpret it. The people don't care. People don't need it. And trust me, people don't care if they leave and it's the end of a church. They don't care. All people care about are themselves. I think another concept is, and I don't know if I can phrase this right. Think of it this way. Spiritual, but not religious, is not a neutral statement. It's competitive. When people say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious, that's not a neutral statement. It's a competitive statement. See, the data is showing that people aren't abandoning spirituality. They're not. They're not leaving spirituality. They're redistributing it. Hey, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. Not religious means I probably don't go to church, but I'm spiritual. But that spirituality can be redistributed to astrology, to mysticism, to some TikTok spiritual influencer, to a therapeutic language, or to an artificial intelligence mediated spirituality. Because Christianity, and what's the implication of all of that? Christianity is no longer competing with atheism. It's no longer competing with secularism. It's competing with every form of spirituality that's out there. And when people say, hey, I'm spiritual but not religious, what that means is the church, no, I don't care about the church, but I love spirituality. But that spirituality could come from, they could redistribute it to 15 different sources. The church then is competing with a personalized spiritual worldview or a spiritual system, and they can personalize it. It can be a spirituality without repentance, without submission, without accountability. And these systems feel emotionally validating, are immune to falsification because you made your own system, and so you can kind of believe whatever you want. So how does anyone falsify it? And it doesn't really condemn itself. And I think that these are all far more formidable as a competition to the church than just outright disbelief. Where the church is not fighting disbelief. The church is not fighting a rejection of spirituality. The church in many cases is not even fight a rejection of Christianity. It's just a rejection of the institution and whatever. Done. Another thing all of this tells us is that moral language, I think, has lost its shared framework in some ways. The decline of Christianity means the loss of any shared definition of sin. Nobody agrees. Even in the church, they don't really agree. A shared moral understanding is gone. Shared narratives of guilt and forgiveness is gone. Now, people are morally outraged, but it's morally outraged based on whatever you want to be morally outraged about. I think people are still deeply hold to moral language, but they don't have any there's not a transcendent grounding in their morality. I think what's shaping people's morality is moralism, is self-created moralism being directed by politicians. I think your moral outrage is determined by politics, not scripture. Which then leads me to the next major point. Political Christianity is accelerating this exodus. I'm sorry, I'm going to continue to stand by that. Whether you like this or not, Christianity is widely perceived, all right, especially conservative. So I'm going to say it this way. Conservative Christianity, what we may say theologically conservative, biblically sound Christianity, is widely perceived by those as nothing more than Trump supporters. MAGA, Republican. They're seen as a voting bloc. They're seen as a power structure. They're seen as an instrument in the culture war. Whether it's fair or not, you're guilty by association. And the church should have never associated itself with Trump, with Republicans, with any political party. But the church did so, and it will not stop, and it will not back down. It continues to double down, and it's become so politically hijacked that everyone should leave the church because the church stopped being the church. It became Trump University. And when Christianity is framed as a means of social control, yeah. Hey, the church is like, we're going to take over this, and we're going to make people do this, and we're going to ban books, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to try to control what everyone does in society as if we're, the parent grounding everyone and putting them in timeout so that they only do what we want them to do. When the church tries to act like they're morally superior, well, people are going to reject the institution without ever encountering the gospel because all they hear is your stinking politics. And the minute people only see politics when they think Christian or they think the church, then the church is dead and it's useless and it's worthless and it's garbage. The glory has departed. And that's just a reality. Now, in some ways, while the church fights to impose its influence, see, here's the thing. When I say the church has lost its influence, it has lost its influence theologically, spiritually, biblically. It's trying to but in the meantime, it's trying to force its influence through political means and through political force, which then makes more people more hostile to the church. Not hostile to Christ, not hostile to the message of the cross, hostile to your bright red hat and your Trump supporting nonsense. That's what people get sick of. And they have every right to get sick of that. Maybe the collapse of cultural Christianity, maybe will actually purify the church, right? Maybe if the church completely collapses, then there'll be something left that will resemble, I don't know, Bible preaching and the gospel. I think the danger is that the church is going to double down on wrong solutions. I think typically what the church will be, it's going to give more moralism, more political alignment, more therapeutic Christianity, more entertainment-driven church models. And some of this may slow the decline. It may slow the decline. It may keep the church alive, but I think it only accelerates its irrelevance. I mean, there's so many problems with all of this. I'll say it this way. The Great Unchurching is not, let me state this clearly, is not a rejection of God. It's a rejection of institutional authority, moralistic religion, politicized Christianity, and unexamined tradition. The unchurching it's a rejection of institutional authority, which the church itself already taught us to reject its own institutional authority. It's a rejection of moralistic religion. It's a rejection of politicized Christianity. It's a rejection of unexamined tradition. So what does this call for us? Well, we need to have intellectual honesty. I think we need some theological clarity. And I think we have to get back to Scripture, the gospel, law, gospel distinction, many of the things we talk about. I think it's also, I'll say this. I think it really calls for the church. Now, when I say the church, not these culturally influenced, politically hijacked churches, but a church. I think it really calls for it to reconsider what it really wants to accomplish. Does it simply want to ensure that there's enough people in the pew to continue to pay the bills, hire the staff, and so you have all the program? Do you just want to maintain the system? And I think some people just want to maintain the system. You got to pay the bills, you just got to keep that going. You got to keep the people coming in so that you keep the money flowing. If you keep the money flowing, then the institution remains. If that's all you want, then just keep doing what you're doing. Make sure you make a little change here, a little change there. Don't make little Susie or little Johnny mad so that they'll get mad and leave your church. Keep them in the church. Make sure you find replacements because you're going to probably lose about 15% in a year anyway. So make sure you got the replacements coming in. Find a good pipeline to keep people coming into your church. And if you're good at stealing people from other churches, just keep that up because that'll keep bringing people in. All right. So if that's what you want to do, but if you want to actually, reach and influence, you better figure out that the way to reach and influence people is not going to be that pew sitting in front of the pulpit. Now, I'm not saying get rid of the pew. I'm not saying get rid of that. I'm saying you're going to have to realize you're going to have to reach the people who are never going to walk through that door. And the only way you're going to reach them is you got to use everything from podcast, YouTube. You got to use that. You got to be a voice that goes to where we're supposed to go. And we got to go to where the people are. But we don't want to go with our nonsensical cultural Christianity, politically hijacked Christianity, but go with something worth giving people. And that's supposed to be historical biblical Christianity. Now, I wanted to get to all my predictions of 2026. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 8 predictions for 2026. They're right here. And for $19.99, I will give you. Okay, no, I'm joking. You will get those the next time I turn on the microphone and go live. And I don't know when that will be, but that will be hopefully soon. And not hopefully today. I do need to finish this, and we got to finish some of our stuff for the weight of Christmas. Even though it's the day after, we got to finish up some of that because we got to deal with an ancient heresy that we mentioned, but we have to talk about. All right, so I want to kind of go back and review all of that, but there you have it. The Great Unchurching. Something's happening. We're either going to wake up, or well, maybe we don't want to wake up. Does it really even matter? I don't know. You draw your own conclusions. Thanks for listening. Everyone have a great day. God bless.